Hey everyone, it's Editing C. I just wanted to pop in and say I'm sorry that you can literally see me turning on and off my camera. This is not how I normally film videos, and so editing it was really weird, but I hope you all enjoy it nevertheless, and I will see you in 2 seconds when the video starts again. Okay, bye! Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today I am going to be doing a quick discussion of Windwitch by Susan Dennard. This is the second book in the Witchland series, so just to cover myself, just so everyone knows, this is going to be going deeply into spoilers about this book. So if you have not read Windwitch, and if you plan on reading this series, I would not watch this video. If you don't care about spoilers, I'm happy to have you hang out, or if you've read the book, I would love to hear your thoughts on what I'm going to be talking about. I finished Windwitch last night, and so I have a lot of thoughts fresh in my brain that I also just decided to jot down my little notebook here, and I'm excited to talk about what I liked and didn't quite like about this book. So I'm gonna start talking about spoilers now, so just you've been warned. The first thing with this book that I felt a lot with Truthwitch as well, which is the first book, which I also just read for context. I read that earlier this month and then immediately picked up Windwitch, so they're both fresh in my mind. This is something I thought again with Truthwitch, and I still think it for this one. These books need a glossary really, really badly, and I think it is a huge disservice to the book that they don't have a glossary. What I mean by a glossary is just being able to flip to the back, being like, hey, what is this kind of witch? What does this word mean? Because there are so many new places that we have a map, but some of the places aren't even on the map. And there's so many different kinds of witches that it's we don't really know what they can do. And I think that Susan Dennard was trying to make it so it was a thing of ooh, you're figuring out how these witcheries work as you're reading. The problem is that there's so many of them and there's so many different plot points happening that it's hard to keep track of that. And so let's say in 2 books from now, we do get answers to all that stuff. It's I'm gonna forget even what my questions were during this book. You know, it needs a glossary desperately. On the same note as that, this is book 2. So we've now had almost 1,000 pages of stories set in this world, and we still do not have enough context on the witcheries and where they came from. Here's the thing. It's book 2. We should have more context on this, because I know with Iseult's family that pretty much everyone in her family is a thread witch, or a lot of people in her village are thread witches. And it's okay, so is it a inherited thing? Why are some witcheries rarer than others? Who's the one that is creating this I don't know, this agency of them, where if you are not registered as a witch, then you can get in trouble by the Hellbards? I don't understand why any of that is happening, and I think that some context that would be great. And again, I think Susan Dennard is really trying to be a thing where it's when you figure it out, it'll be it'll blow your mind, it'll be so cool. But the thing is, there's so much happening that it's I'm not gonna remember all of this. I think also with this book specifically, because both books have been multiple POV so far, I think that this book, while I liked the points of view, I don't know if they were structured quite right. Because of there being so many different points of view, it was narratively very clunky, the narrative timing of it. The pacing was really off and clunky in parts. There were parts where it would be cool, we're about to get in a really cool action scene and we're going to a different POV, sorry. And the problem with that is then when you get back to that action scene, you're pulled out of it and you're okay, wait, what's happening? Why do I care about this? And so it takes a little while to get into each POV, which is a big disservice. I also really enjoyed Vivia, but I don't know if narratively her POV should have been in this book. I think I would have loved to follow a book that was kind of just about Vivia. Or I also would have loved this book if it was just following American Vivia and it was just those 2 POVs. But there were so many POVs that it just felt overwhelming sometimes. Also, unfortunately, Safi's POV was kind of the most boring in my opinion, which bums me out because I've been on a pirate kick recently. I've been really into pirates recently, and this book just did not do it for me with Safi in this one. I did not feel her character developed very much. I felt she was relatively boring, and her POV was relatively boring, and there was a lot of stuff that was brought up in that POV that I wanted more of, that I never ended up getting. And so I was like, okay, I don't really know why I need to care about this right now. Going off of that, I was like, I want more about this arena that's like in the pirate town. I was like, what is this arena that they like bring people into to fight each other? I'm like, I want more of that, but like we didn't know more of that. We didn't really get to see any of that happen. I was like, that's a really interesting thing for Safi's point of view, and it never really was brought up. I also, this isn't specifically to like Safi's POV, but in general, I want to know more about Safi and Izilt, like training together when they were younger, and like their mentors and how they became such close friends. And that like really is never brought up. And I think that that would be a really great way of doing character development. The character development in this book, I don't know if I like it or not. A lot of the character development was done between like codependency, and I think that that's a really interesting idea to play with, but I don't know if it really worked for this. I think that flashback could have been utilized in this book. It wasn't really, and I'm kind of surprised by it, especially since the pacing was already off. I think that a lot of this could have, a lot of the like context for the series could be told through flashback, and that would help the reader understand what was going on a lot more. So the insta-love between Merrick and Safi in the first in Truthwitch. I didn't love it in Truthwitch. I think that it's fun if they would have ended up together. I'm not a fan of insta-love. I much prefer a like good slow burn romance, especially in fantasy. But here's the thing. Susan Dennard really tried for this insta-love romance in the first book. The second book, they're separated the whole time, and so the insta-love from the first book felt so hollow. Like there was no development on that relationship whatsoever in this book because they were separated. And I'm like, okay, you could have had the same story in Truthwitch, not had that weird insta-love happen, and then Windwitch happen, and then the next book start developing a relationship if they end up back together. Again, I haven't read Bloodwitch yet, so I'm not sure if they're gonna end up like back in the same area. But I just don't see the point of adding a insta-love relationship and then just not having them like anywhere near each other, and not even have them be brought up very much besides like, oh god, the other person's dead. That's like really the only time they talk about each other. And I'm like, I don't know. I think that it just could have been developed better in terms of their relation. One of my other big complaints with this book is I'm very into like atmospheric settings, and this book introduced a lot of places that should have been atmospheric. But here's the thing. The pirate town and the forest did not feel different tonally to me. The pirate town and the courtrooms of like Vivia talking to the king didn't feel different to me. And I'm like, those should be tonally and in vibe like very different, and they did not feel different to me. They felt very much like, yeah, I'm just telling the story and these are different backdrops. And I'm like, but there should be a different, I don't want to say like vibe or energy, but like there should have been, you know, there should have been a different kind of feeling when you were in the pirate town versus when you were in the sewers. And I don't really understand, they weren't sewers, but like the underground area. Like I feel like there should have been more with that, and I don't understand why tonally there was no shifts in the narrative. I already said it, but I'm gonna say it again. It's okay to explain things a little bit to your reader. I'm not a huge fan of info dumping, but what I'll say, giving some info is fine. You don't have to info dump to give like some info, because with this book, I don't know, there was just stuff with this book where I was like, you know, at one point Merrick is talking to Vivia and is like, oh yeah, it's the Shadow Man. And I'm like, what? You've never called him that before. Like, and I get who he's referring to in the story, but again, it was the whole thing of, it's the Shadow Man, and Vivia was like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna go with it. And I'm like, could you not like explain things a little bit to characters that wouldn't know what's going on? Even if you don't write out like, here's the full description of what this is, like, you could at least be like, you know, Merrick explains what happened to Vivia. Like, you can add a little bit of that in, just because it felt like all the characters always knew what was going on, but the reader didn't. And it's like, I don't understand why a character would always know what was going on, but the reader wouldn't when you're reading it at the same time that the character's explaining it or experiencing these things. So it felt a little bit odd in terms of how much context there was to the story. Okay, I literally want to read a section of this book. It was when Adrian, I think that's how you pronounce it, when he was attacked near the end of the book, there is a part that was so unrealistically confusing to me that it just fully took me out of the story. And I'm gonna read it real quick. This is on page 321, and it says, it's after he was shot by an arrow, or multiple arrows, I think. Yeah, multiple arrows. Broken rib, pierced left lung, pierced heart. The impaled heart would be a problem. That would slow him. Pierced heart. And this guy's just like, yeah, I mean, you know. And he really acts so nonchalant about it, and I just don't get it. And I know that with him being a blood witch, he can heal a little bit, but I'm like, if your heart was pierced, you're not gonna react a little bit? It just felt so unrealistic that he did not die there, and I don't understand why they had to pierce his heart. Like, the scene could have been the same, and it wouldn't have taken me out of it as much if it would have been like, oh yeah, his lung was pierced. Like, you can survive with a pierced lung. But the fact that it was like his heart was pierced, it just didn't make sense. And it felt like plot armor of like the strongest kind, just the strongest steel plot armor. It reminded me of like when you're playing a video game and the main character that like you're playing, oh my gosh, that character can get hit so many times, get shot so many times, and they're fine, but like you can just shoot a NPC immediately and they just go down, they're fine, like they're just dead. And I don't understand why that happened in this book, because I feel like normally the amount of harm that a person gets into, like they're suffering from, that makes sense in this book. Like, I think that Susan Dennard does a good job with like how much a character gets injured, how much they're suffering from it. This did not make sense. And the fact that like in the book before, Iseult got like really hurt and was out for like weeks is kind of what was being implied, or at least days, where she was like going in and out of consciousness. He fully gets his heart pierced and is like, I'm fine, I can keep moving. What? Like, what? The last negative thing that I want to say about this book is I think that the way that Safi and Iz got back together and started talking at the end of this book was really cheap. I think that the puppeteer plotline in this book is fascinating. It's, I think, my favorite plotline that comes through this. I think that Esme is one of the best developed characters, to be honest. I think that she is so interesting, and I think that that plotline is really interesting. That being said, why? Why did they get back together with the, like, I'm just gonna talk to her through her dreams? Like, why is it that you learn how to do one thing? Like, why is it that Iz can learn how to do one thing and then all of a sudden she can do everything that Esme can do? The whole thing is with this book, like, the whole book we've been waiting to, like, see Safi and Iz get back together. And they get back together for, like, a really cheap, like, dream sequence. And I'm like, I would have rather just not had them get back together in this book than have that happen, to be honest. I did not love that. Okay, so I know I had quite a bit negative to say about Windwitch. That does not mean I did not enjoy it. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because it was still a very fun book to read. It just wasn't the best. I have hopes for this series. I am going to continue reading it. I do enjoy the characters with it, and I'm hoping that as the series goes on, it's going to get better developed. The world definitely got more developed in this story, which I appreciated. I'm starting to get a more solid understanding of the, like, land and physical space that they're in, which I appreciate. There's a lot of fun things that were introduced in this book, like the idea of the different, like, the sea foxes and the monsters, and, like, I think that was introduced in Truthwitch a little bit as well, but, like, it was definitely more explored in this book. There was definitely things that I liked about it. And I do want to end this video on talking about the different things in this book that I did enjoy, because, again, I gave it a 3.5 star. Like, I did enjoy this book. The first thing that I absolutely adored in this book was that Merrick's ship was named after his mom. I think that that is such a beautiful, like, point in this story, and also, like, I think it says so much about Merrick, and I think it's a really interesting way to further develop his character that he named his ship after his mom. Like, that, it, like, makes my heart warm to have read that part. Okay, so I know I said that the puppeteer was, like, my favorite part of this book, and, like, all the stuff that happened with the puppeteer. Really just anything that was happening with Iseult. I loved Iseult, and I love Iseult and Adrian. Like, their, like, slow budding relationship that's going, like, that is a good example of, like, a slow burn kind of relationship, because, like, I feel like they might end up together, but I don't know. Like, they could end up together, or they might not end up together at all, and either way, I think that is really interesting. But another part that I absolutely loved of this was when Isiel cleaved the Fire Witch. I thought that that was written so well. I thought that having it be from Aeduan's perspective was a fantastic writing choice. Because I was wondering about that. I was like, I don't know if I would have liked reading it from Isiel's perspective. I don't know if it could have been done well, just because I feel like it would have been very chaotic and kind of clunky, but seeing it from Aeduan's perspective and like the part where she like snaps the thread in his teeth and he like sees all of that, fantastic writing choice. I really liked that part. I also really liked Owl. I thought that that was a really fun way to add in a new character. I really like how Aeduan and Owl interacted with each other. I thought that she was such a great device to help further develop Aeduan's character. I do hope that in the future we see a little bit more from her and more about what her exact witchery is, because it's so fascinating to me, and I think that it could come up in really interesting ways throughout the story. But yeah, I really liked how they interacted together. I thought it was very sweet. The other thing that I loved was I really enjoyed Cam as a character. I thought that they were so cool. The one thing I did have an issue with is I was like, if you want to write a trans character, like just write a trans character. And maybe that'll again be something that's developed further throughout the rest of the story. But I was like, I can't tell if you're trying to write a trans character or not, and if you are, you're just doing it in kind of a weird way. But in a way that I am still interested in reading from. But I thought that Cam as a person was hilarious and was such a like breath of fresh air and was so enjoyable. Ryber was one of my favorite characters from Truthwitch, and so the fact that she came back and at the end of this book made me very happy. I love the fact that the three of them are traveling together, because I think that it's going to be a very interesting dynamic for the rest of the series. Overall, these were some of my spoilery thoughts on Windwitch. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Again, I am going to continue on reading these books. I might take a break from the series for a little while and pick up Blood, which I believe is the next one, before the most recent book is coming out, because I know there's a book in this series coming out, and I want to say like summer or fall of next year. And I think I want to take a break and then pick that one up before jumping into the one that is just coming out, just that way they're like closer together, so that way I have it fresh in my brain. But I am definitely excited to continue on with the series. I think that it might be one of those ones that gets better as it goes on. But again, like, I know Susan Dennard isn't watching this, but if she was, like, please just add a glossary. Like, that would change these books so much. If these books ever get reprinted and like re-put out, glossary. Just glossary, please. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you all have a good day and a good week, and that you're all doing well, and I will see you all in another video very soon. Bye!